You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Devil Doc Talk Show. Today we have an amazing show with the Honorable Inspector General Cheryl Mason from the Veterans Affairs of the Office of Inspector General. That is a mouthful and I got it all out, everybody. Oh my God, I did it. I even added the Honorable. Whew, it's been a while. Thank you so much for being on, Cheryl. I really appreciate your time coming on. Like we were doing a little bit of a pre-show here, guys. Really excited to bring the Inspector General to our community and have these kind of conversations where we can bridge gaps, mend fences and other avenues, and definitely start walking a path of empathy and love and course correction. I think that's one of the things, me and my wife were just talking about it this morning. Course correction, as much as an observation is good, as much as an intention is good, we need to be going down that path where the effect and actionable results are what's highlighted. I'm really excited to get into the work of what you guys have been doing with your office and the way that you represent our ability to share what we do with the show, 8 Acts Entertainment and the Devil Doc Talk Show, but more so the opportunity to, what we were leading on to is to share that it's not that intimidating, right? We shouldn't be so hesitant to have these conversations with persons like yourself. Let's get in on it, right? So thank you so much for being on today. Cheryl, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled to be here.
I really like to dive in first about your personal background, right? Where did you get involved in the military, or I should say the Veterans Affairs, or anything like that, where you've been able to really hedge a path for yourself in leadership, but also lead with this beautiful heart and this intention? How did that start? Were you always into politics? Was that something, or leadership? Or where did that journey begin?
Well, the journey began in Southern Ohio and Appalachia. My parents were World War II generation, and I lost my father, who was a World War II Navy veteran, to suicide when I was 4. And that was very hard to lose him, but it was even more difficult because that was not something that in 1969 that people really understood. They didn't understand mental health challenges. They definitely didn't understand suicide. And, it was very hard. And people who we knew turned their back to us on the street. And it was the veteran community who supported my mother and myself. My mom was a teacher. She was, in fact, a government teacher, which probably gives you the rest of the story on a little bit about me. And so I was raised by a single widowed mother in Appalachia at a time when that was very novel. And I was, people told me that I wasn't expected to amount to much, and she told me I could do whatever I wanted. And so I took her lead. Went to college, studied political science and psychology, and was headed to law school. But, college also presented opportunities for meeting people. And I met my husband, who at the time was an Air Force ROTC candidate, and upon graduation became an Air Force lieutenant. And so that charted a different course. I got to go to 2 law schools. And so I finished law school in Nebraska. And, during that time, again, as a military spouse, it was the 80s. Military spouses weren't supposed to want careers. In fact, I was told, again, I couldn't have one, couldn't do that. And I disagreed and was already in law school. But the interesting thing that really happened, and, things happen in your lives that intersect things. I came from this background where, my father was a veteran. And so I was around veterans as a child regularly. I worked as an intern, in fact, the first military spouse intern at the Judge Advocate General office at Offutt Air Force Base. And the JAG colonel who I worked for happened to be a POW from Vietnam. His name was Hank Fowler. And Hank really tried hard to recruit me into the Air Force, but I really felt that one of us serving in the military was enough. I'll be the spouse. And so he said, okay, if you're not going to go in the military, you got to go work for VA. And so wouldn't you know it, our next duty station was DC. And I found the VA. I started working for the Board of Veterans Appeals. And I really enjoyed the work. I found it fulfilling. It matched with my background and what I understood. And that really, those things kind of came together. And, we had many friends and family members who served. I took a break and went overseas for a while, worked a little bit overseas for the Air Force. Came back, worked at a different government agency for about a year and decided I need to go back to VA. And I came back to VA and I was here till I retired, took a couple of years off, and the administration asked me to come back and serve again. And I couldn't pass up the opportunity to continue serving veterans. It's my passion. It's what I do. Veterans and their family members, such as myself. It's a challenging role. It's a difficult time, and it's hard from serving to transition and beyond. And so I felt that it was important for me to step back in initially as senior advisor. And then the president decided to nominate me as Inspector General. And when he asked me to take the role, he said, are you willing to take the role? And my answer was, I serve at the pleasure, which is the answer for any political appointee. I serve at the pleasure of the president.
That is so amazing, right? It's a very packed journey to unpack and discuss at length, right? So we'll only hit a few, I guess, major talking points there. You mentioned something about loss of life, right? And the tragedy of suicide and the effect and impact it had societally for what it is you experienced as a young child and your mother as a widowed mother, right? Where we forget sometimes that, yes, the times don't necessarily adjust at the speed of need. It is very much a developmental thing, and it takes empathy and desire and I want to say intention to change that. But I love how you said it is, my mom told me I could be anything. And so I wanted to be this, and you went after it. And then to be told the same thing, like, oh, military spouses, you shouldn't want to work. It's like, whoa, what era, what decade are we living in, right? How did you triumph through those challenging times? And how would you, I guess, correlate your passion to your work now? And how does it best serve you, right? Having that negative experience, I know it really ties and bonds trauma, right? Trauma bonding, like they call it in the military.
Yeah.
How do you use that in the position you're currently in? And how did you use that to get through to this position you're in now?
Well, I think when you go through that type of situation, so I not only lost my father, but 13 years later, I lost my brother, who had actually served in the reserve as well, to also suicide. So when you go through that and you live through it, and you have people who are making presumptions about you, you learn very quickly that people are going to do that. And you can't control it. So you control what you can control is who you are and what your integrity level is and how you want to be. And so my viewpoint also learned from my mother. I stand on her shoulders. She passed in 2018, but I stand very strongly on her shoulders. Is that you can't let others decide who you are. You get to decide who you are. And that's your responsibility. And then from there, then you carve who you are, and how you act and what you do and everything about you sends that message. And so I tell people often, whether it's my team or whether I'm engaging with stakeholders or others, I have three primary things that drive me. I call it VIP. Because I think each of us are, if we're not a VIP to ourselves, then we're not doing ourselves any good. We have to be our own VIPs first. And it stands for value, impact, and purpose. So where and how can I bring value to those I work with, who I live with, who I serve? How do I impact them? What does that look like? And then that drives my purpose, which for me is veterans and military members and their families.
That's beautiful. I love acronyms. It helps my TBI brain, which is an acronym, very well. VIP, value, impact, and purpose. That's amazing because the next question I have is relative to your current work, right? How do you apply the value, impact, and purpose, which you just illuminated me to one of the most perfect acronyms I could include in my life now? How do you do that from a day-to-day when you're dealing with the Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General, right? How do you add value to that already huge title and responsibility, right? The watchdog of the VA, one of the largest apparatus in the world, the largest medical apparatus, I believe, in the United States. How do you apply that value, impact, and purpose to every morning?
Well, for me, it starts with why we are here. Why do we exist? Why does the VA exist, and why does VA OIG exist? And it goes back to President Lincoln's promise to care for those who served and their widows and orphans, and to care for those who bore in the battle. And so our mission statement is reflective of that. We conduct the independent oversight of the department, and we do that through combating fraud, waste, and abuse, and we improve the effectiveness and efficiency of VA operations and programs to serve veterans and their families. So it's at our core.
That's amazing because it's a huge responsibility, right? We're talking about, exactly what you said, that for those who bore the burden of war, and for the widow and their child, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's profound because when we talk about these type of efforts, right? Of course, it's very difficult to understand. Like, what is an audit? What is an investigation? What is fraud, waste, and abuse? Because sometimes people have very I want to say basic perspectives, right? What would be the qualifications of something that would be reported or reportable? That way people understand, like, hey, we really are working in this fraud, waste, and abuse things. This administration's really hitting hard with fraud, waste, and abuse. California, not to throw shade on anybody politically, but California needs a lot of help, okay?
They're not alone in needing a lot of help. I think when you think about it, like, the people of this organization are the core of what we do. So any organization, you have to have people at what you do. And we have about 30% veterans, and we're working on trying to increase that a little bit, 30% veterans and military family members. But when you think about fraud, okay, people are like, what is fraud? Well, fraud can be basically when somebody intentionally, you mentioned intentionality previously. When it comes to the law and fraud, and any lawyer will tell you, my investigators will tell you, fraud requires intent to take an action that's going to take away a benefit from a veteran, a service from a veteran, or take away dollars or impact those programs at VA. So for fraud, that's what we're looking at, is somebody intentionally taking action to basically commit a crime and take away benefits or services or programs, or that's the fraud piece.
Okay.
The audit, and that's what the investigators, the special agents, look at. The audit piece is really it's a different type of inspection. It's an inspection and review of what's going on in the VA program or operation. So we go in, and what a lot of people say is, you lift the hood of the truck and you look at the engine. Why is it running? What's wrong? Why is it sputtering? That's exactly what an audit is. We're trying to get to, why is this a problem? Is it a lack of control? Are there too many cooks in the kitchen with accountability and oversight? Are they not? Is the law and policy not aligned? Is there a bad actor in the mix? All of those things, like what's happening. So that's what the audits are about. And we do audits across the entire department, everything you can think of. And then the medical inspectors, again, it's a different type of inspection. So a lot of the medical inspections are cyclicals, which means we go in regularly to healthcare facilities in the VA, and we're looking for particular things, patient safety issues, patient risk, or areas. We're looking at the environment. Do they have the right signage? Do they have the right information? How are they connecting with the veteran community? How is the leadership connecting with their employees? How are they connecting with stakeholders? That's really what the medical inspections are. Occasionally, we do get complaints. Those come into our hotlines, and anybody can call in a complaint and tell us, they have concerns about something. And that's quite frankly where a lot of our work comes from, both in fraud and inspection. Something happened. I have concerns. I don't think this smells right, looks right, sounds right. And so from there, we'll go and we just simply look. And sometimes there's there, and sometimes there's not.
That's very important to kind of highlight, is not just the fact that there's these mechanisms for oversight, quality, quantitative controls, right? But the process of it, right? If somebody has an experience, and you said it, this is where the bulk of the bane of the work comes from, is people reporting and communicating, right? They have a negative experience. They reach out to, a mechanism of resources, because the way that I learned it is the VA OIG is not your first line of defense. Okay. It's talk to the person, just like in the military, right? Go face to face, have an off channel conversation, or just any way to clarify it. And then you have your patient advocacy's offices. You talk to them, you try to incorporate solutions. You have your crisis line for that moment when you're in crisis. And then you also have specialized teams like the SPT teams. And then even further, of course, with the White House hotline complaints that, are an available tool for the veteran community to communicate a lot of what these issues that people are experiencing are. One of the things I really want to highlight is a recent conversational point about fraud within the veteran community. The determination of who's committing what, when, and how, it seems to be very placated to journalism's whim, right? Where you have individuals at the Washington Post, you have other larger organizations having or pushing forth this perspective of observation that getting benefits for veterans are too easy, right? We're just handing them over, that veterans are mooching the system, so to speak. Is that even near tangible or true?
No.
Okay.
It's not. And I testified to that in last October. And here's why. Look, prior to this role, I was the chairman of the Board of Veterans Appeals. I was a judge at VA. I was an attorney. And my business was adjudicating veterans benefits and services in the department. And so I've kind of been looking at different sides of the same coin in this role. And, are there situations where veterans may emphasize something more or focus on something it's beyond what it may be? Yes. Oftentimes that's because they really believe that that's the case, right? Or they've been told, or they're really frustrated and they're just trying to get somebody's attention to listen to them. But that's not fraud, okay? In most cases, and we do not target veterans as a whole if we're looking for fraud. We just don't. Quite frankly, the veterans community polices themselves. Most of the people that turn veterans in for fraud to us are other veterans or family members, interestingly. And so it's a very interesting dynamic. But really what we see in the veteran community, it's probably somewhere around 4% of the veteran community that's engaging in fraud in their claims, right? What is happening, though, is there is a significant number of people who are taking advantage of veterans, scamming veterans, and trying to get those benefits that those veterans have earned through their service, that they deserve through their service. Each veteran is a unique individual, just like every human is a unique individual. They bring their own unique DNA and perspectives and experience to who they are. So when they get benefits, it's going to be uniquely them. Right. But there are people out there who want to say, oh, well, everybody's the same. And it's all, and so they try to take things to that level. And then they try to tell other veterans, well, Harry down the street has this, so you must have that. Well, maybe not. Depends on the situation. But then, do I have it? Am I thinking about it? You plant the seed. And that can sometimes lead our veterans astray. Does that mean that they're committing fraud? No, they made a mistake. They made a statement that was beyond right. But the intention comes where you have an actor whether it's an entity, whether it's a representative, whether it's an advisor who's encouraging or telling the veteran or basically providing the veteran misinformation or providing information on the veteran's behalf that's not accurate. And that we will go after all day long, everywhere.
That's important to establish the paradigm of observation, right? I've been through a lot of experiences in my past 16 years, and a lot of them stem from what you brought up, misinformation or misunderstandings or how to do something the appropriate way. And I noticed that a lot of times, like you were saying, it's not the individual veterans, it's these bad actors, it's these claim sharks. I understand there's even contractors that are performing things at a certain clip where I was like, whoa, the numbers behind it are just like, what do you mean? There's like all of this numbers, like so many numbers. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm avoiding to say a number, right? But I noticed that it's very difficult to understand the role of the Office of Inspector General, right? As a person that's just in the field, talking to people, because I'm always curious if there's a complaint made, if there's a fraud, like somebody saying, hey, this person's doing that, or this organization we noticed aren't actually approving these outcomes, or, interestingly enough, this contracted VA benefits observational group, they're denying everybody because of whatever parameters they're being coached through with whatever their PowerPoint slides are, which is fine. I know it's a learning curve for everybody. Every year, the VA comes up with new conditions, presumptives, the PACT Act, the Elizabeth Dole Act. All these things have a profound effect on the day-to-day of everybody engaging. Now, I guess the more important question is, what happens when somebody does file a report? Where does it go? Does it like just disappear into the ether, or what is the process of something when it's tangible, or received and then sought after?
Okay, so normally when we get a complaint in, what's going to happen is our hotline team, that's the center where you can report things on our website, you can call and report something. It's easier on the website because if you have documents, you can attach them there, and that's always helpful. But when that comes in, then our triage team takes a look at it. And basically what their triaging team is, where does it go? If it's fraud, it's going to go to the special agents. If it's something to do with audits, it may go to the audit team, or medical inspections, it goes over to medical inspections. So and sometimes it goes to multiple places because it touches all of it, right? And so, but one of the examples I think to best explain is like education fraud. Education fraud is one of our top areas of fraud. And people are like, how is education fraud one of the top areas of fraud? It's not the veterans who are getting education benefits. It's the people who are setting up shell businesses. So, for example, we heard of a situation where a person had set up a business to offer barbering and cosmetology to veterans. Well, okay, those are good things for veterans to learn if they're interested in that area. So the agents go in and they take a look at it, and it said the organization was getting benefits from the GI Bill, and it was reporting things to the VA for several veterans who were enrolled as students, right? But we sat and watched, because that's what happens in investigations. We're watching in some way, whether we're sitting there or we have cameras or other things. And we noticed that there was like no one attending, nobody going in and out of that business. There was a business, and nobody's going in and out. So we kind of looked into some things on the VA side. We saw for everything we saw, we didn't see any tests or exams. We talked to a few people, and basically nothing was happening. So we charged the person for basically fraudulently operating a business, which they were. And they had to pay restitution, and they were sentenced to 8 years, and they defrauded the VA of almost $3 million in veterans educational benefits. $3 million. Those were education benefits that were supposed to go to veterans for actually attending classes and getting degrees, which they weren't. I mean, that's so, that's kind of how it happened. It was reported. We checked it out. We followed up. We did our due diligence. We did some subpoenas. We did some search warrants, and that's what we found, right? Because that's what investigators do. Just like any other agent or criminal investigator is going to do. That's how we're going to do that part of the business. An auditor is basically what we do on audits and medical inspections. We go into VA. We walk in the door, and we are on site talking to VA personnel, looking at things, watching activities, paying attention. Sometimes we're there for a couple of days. Sometimes we're there for a couple of weeks. Just depends on what we're watching, what we're looking at, what's happening. And then we're assessing. And then we also can pull data out and look at different data we can see from the department and what makes sense and things like that. So then we do some interviews. And then we're going to kind of run that through and assess things. We'll compare to other areas, or if it's just an inspection or an audit situation where we think things aren't working, then we issue a report. And the report goes to VA first. We're talking to VA all the time. We have an entrance exam. We're talking to them. We're on site. Then we talk to them at the exit exam and exit conference. And then they get the draft report. They get a chance to comment on the draft report. Those comments are included on our final report. And then we publish the final report and we tell everybody this is what happened and this is what we found. And we try to do that based on facts and evidence and tell the story so everybody can follow along and go, okay, that makes sense, right? We're not here to play gotcha with the department. That's not our job. Our job is to look at things and say, is it great? Is it operating the way it should be? And sometimes that happens. Those reports don't get picked up. They're not sensational or sexy enough that, we didn't find any recommendations or anything to say. But then in the areas where we say, we see some issues, we have some concerns here, that's what we report. And that's what we make a recommendation to the department. We cannot direct the department to do anything. We make a recommendation to the department, and then the department decides whether they should act or not.
That's very interesting, right? It's a non-dictatorial kind of a quality control, really, not quantitative.
That's
right?
Exactly what it is.
And the way that it reminds me of when I was a lab tech in NEFL Centro. I built out the whole lab there at NEFL Centro from the ground up. I mean, drywall, sinks, furniture, paint, all of it, right? But the more fascinating part that I had was with CAP, right? College of American Pathologists, I think is what it stands for. I used to be able to remember this stuff, okay? And we would get tests, right? They would come in and check us, and we had to have QC on point and all these different things. And there was a procedure, the same way that you're saying, here's the procedure. You treat it exactly like a patient. You have the outcomes, you have the measurements. And when the QA is off, there was one unique opportunity that I had. I reported the things that I saw, right? It was on a urinalysis QC assay, right? Just the sticks, the little strips.
Yeah.
And I constantly reported what I saw, right? I'm a very simple man. If anything, that's my superpower, right? Yeah. And I report it and I think, hey, this is what I'm seeing. It's not what it's supposed to be here on the form, but this is what I'm seeing. Months go by. The CAP comes in, does a whole investigation on it. They were like, do you understand that you were the only person, the only office out of all the offices to find this and hold true to the findings, is that this was off, even though this was supposed to be it? They did a whole investigation on it. I remember having this conversation with the gentleman, much like yourself. You're not there to go, I gotcha, right? Oh, look at you. In other circumstances, sure. But with this, you're really trying to dial in the medical practice, which is, I find passionate, I'm so passionate about it that I find it one of the best topics to, of course, bring to this light is what happens then if those recommendations aren't adhered to? Is there any way to really not just hold accountable, but to adjust the way the practice is happening?
Yes. So what happens is we make the recommendations. Now, again, when we're making these recommendations, we're often not the only ones in, right? Sometimes Joint Commission goes in, sometimes other regulatory bodies go in and look at things. And we are held to a standard of auditing and inspecting that we have to meet. But, when we make those recommendations to the department, what we say is, okay, we made the recommendations, 90 days, we're going to come back because they're open. That means those recommendations are going to be out there, right? And GAO, Government Accountability Office, has a similar practice. And the department really doesn't like to have those open recommendations out there. And so they want us to close them. And we're like, well, we can't close them until you do something, until you follow our recommendations, till you tell us what you're doing. And so, initially, if they come back, and this is what we're actually seeing, not all the time, but we're seeing it more often, is they're coming back within the 90 days and telling us, hey, we did this, we did this, we did this. And sometimes they're telling us actually before the report gets out the door, which is fantastic. Like, we did it. Can you close the recommendation when you announce it, right? But they are coming back. And so, but when they don't, if there's open ones, we go back and ask. Right. Now, for a while, OIG wasn't doing that. We were just waiting for the department. We would ask kind of, but really not really go knock on the door hard. And when I came in as OIG, as the IG, I noticed that we had a lot of pending recommendations out there. And I said, look, what are we doing? And they said, well, we asked, but, the department's busy. And I said, yeah, they're always going to be busy. Right. So how about we ask a little bit, we nudge a little harder. So we started doing that. And I regularly interact with the secretary and some of the other leaders in the department, the undersecretary for health, the acting undersecretary for benefits. And so if we have some open recommendations out there and they aren't tending to move, I will ask, these have been open for a while. Can you tell me what's going on? And so those are some things we do. And you can actually check those out on the website because, we put everything on our website. We try to be as transparent as we can. Investigations are a little tricky, but can't put too much about those until they're over. But on the audits and inspections, you can go out and see our recommendations, and then you can check and see if we've closed any. If in our recent semi-annual report that just came out last week, we closed several that had been pending for years. Because we went back and talked to the department and said, really, what are you doing? Because especially right now, there's so much transformation going on in the department that some of the recommendations we had that were out for years didn't apply anymore. And so we had to figure out what we did and how we came to agreement with the department to address those and say, well, okay, you're doing something different. Those they're not pertinent. So we have to figure out whether the department's changed its tact and it's gone here. And so we'll make a comment to that effect. And sometimes we close it. Sometimes we leave it open and we'll just continue to look at it in the new process it's in.
That's very intense. Okay. Like I'm trying to, rattle my brain around whatever's left in there and say, wow, that's pretty amazing. I was briefing a little bit on the semi-annual report, right? And the accomplishments that your office has had, okay, year over year. I'm always curious to what is, like what you just answered, the process to leveraging these recommendations to improve upon practices, mechanisms, systems, protocols, right? Whatever we're doing, policy, or the effective end of state where the patient, I think of patients, right? But the veteran and the veteran community understands the trajectory, right? I think that's so important to highlight. Is it's not just that you're making these recommendations, your office, instead of other offices, not to be negative towards anybody else, but your office is really taking action where most haven't in communication, where you're asserting, hey, we really got to, and even realizing, dude, some of these things we said not pertinent anymore, right? But the education is there, the line of communication, the ability to manifest a better trajectory, like we said at the beginning of the show, a course correction. Mm-hmm. Do you find it that the VA is receptive to course correction from your office, or is there usually pushback?
Yes, they are. It's been I will tell you, having been a VA employee for nearly 30 years prior to my retirement and then coming back in this role, the department has been changing so much in the past almost 2 years. It's been amazing to watch. I have never seen the amount of change in this department at this level. So they are receptive, and I think that's due to the secretary because he is driving this. And one of the first meetings he had with me is, as when I stepped into the role, he said, look, he said, I understand the role of IG. I understand, you're independent and you operate over here. He said, but I need you to help me drive improvement and to help me drive accountability in the department. So point out where we're not doing that. Please do that. And he said, but please do it in a timely manner, because a lot of our initial reports were old and they weren't keeping up with where the department was. And so we pivoted a little bit. And interestingly, so we could do that. But interestingly, I heard almost the same thing from Congress. So the OIG is unique. The IG is unique in that we report to both the Secretary and the Hill. Right. So the Hill also pays very much attention to our reports, and they can ask us to go look at things just like the Secretary can. And, anybody can say, here, please go look at this. And so the Hill also said, look, we think some of your reports are great, but they're just not timely enough. The department's changing. And because what would happen on the Hill is we would send out a report and they would start to go look at it and find out that the department had already done something or was clear the way up here and we're still back here. And so we started really making that adjustment. So now if we have reports that contain really valuable information, but it's a bit dated, we go back and check before we issue the report and say, hey, is there something we have to look at? Do we have to talk to the department again and make sure that we're staying up to date? And so that we can be accurate, because we don't want to issue something that it's not going to make sense for the department to do to serve veterans. Because like as you noted, I mean, Elizabeth Dole Act has changed quite a bit in the department, as has PACT. And so as the department is implementing those things, there's, even with the VHA transformation, the new electronic health rollout, we're trying to look at all of that at the same time and trying to stay up to date. But I think what we're seeing in the department is they are responsive. And quick story, I was just recently out in the field and had some meetings with some VHA leaders. And I had two of my agents with me, and we were talking about some of the fraud work we're doing and what we're seeing. And a couple of my agents gave examples of some concerning billing practices and some other concerning practices they were seeing. And the leadership said, is there a way we can get you in here for training? And my agent said, of course, because we offer training in the department. Out of that has arisen a new program called the Comprehensive Fraud Training Program, it's built to deter and prevent fraud. And we offer it throughout the department, but specifically focused in those areas where we're seeing more fraud, healthcare benefits. So we can go in and train those people. And it can, currently it's my special agents that are doing it, but we have some people on the audit side who can come in and also do some fraud training. So we're hoping to get them kind of working together on that in the very near future.
That's amazing. It's very difficult to process all of this all at once, because it's really opening my eyes to the complexity of not just quality control, but the effect of these reports, the effect of the work that you do. Because you're right, the world changes every day, and sometimes policies or practices can be really just irrelevant by the end of the week, especially if there's a training program like the one you're discussing. My next kind of interest point here is, as a veteran going through the system that's really just learned a lot today so far, how do we as the veteran community engage with your offices better to really illuminate maybe on some of the gaps that people aren't communicating at any level, let alone at a level for discernible action? How can a veteran or the family of a veteran feel confident and or take that approach to asking or requesting investigation to your office? And what would be relevant for them to say or do, or how? I understand there's the mechanisms of the websites, but really, if we're trying to use the right love language, this is what I teach a lot of people in the entertainment space. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to get a film funded, you gotta start talking that love language of multi-millions of dollars in liability insurances and unions and all the good stuff that comes
All the
along with
stuff.
being a big boy. Yeah, it's so crazy. For you, what would you want a veteran or a family member to know, at least how to begin this process of engaging with your office?
Okay. Well, the first thing I want everybody to know is the OIG is not meant to be scary. It's not who we are. Yes, we have agents. Yes, we have auditors. Yes, we have medical inspectors. Yes, we're looking at stuff. That's what we do. I mean, we're the watchdog, right? That's our job. But we aren't trying to prevent people from going into the department for care or to seek their benefits. We want them to do that. We encourage them to do that. Really, the best way is through the hotline. That's the best way to engage us. It's on our website, and it's a fairly straightforward program that you can walk through and you can explain what your complaint or your concern is. Now, of course, there are things we don't take. Like if you have a complaint about your claim or appeal, that is not us. That is my previous world. That is not me. There are certain things. So we try to spell those out on the website of the things we do take versus the things we don't. So, and you really don't need, I'm not a big fan of using, I understand your point for the movie industry, the love language. But, really what I want veterans to be able to say is, something doesn't seem right. Something doesn't feel right. Something doesn't sound right, smell right. Can you please check it out? And then just describe in your own words on the website, there's a little form about what your concerns are, where it's happening, who's involved, what you know about it. I mean, we don't, hearsay evidence like I heard, Johnny told me down the street. No, we want to know what you know, right? And that's the best way. And you can do this a couple of different ways. Some people are like, oh, I don't want VA to know. Well, you can do it anonymously. It's totally up to you. You can do it confidentially, which means it's primarily going to only be known in OIG. Or you can put your name on it. If you put your name on it and your email on it, we're going to respond and tell you we've got it and we're moving forward. And we'll try to keep you up to date. Well, the biggest concern I hear, and this is something we're working on with our hotline, is I don't know where it is. Like I gave it to you guys and I don't know where it is. Are you guys working it? Are you not working it? Or you sent it to VA. That's what I was complaining about. So there are things that we do work because of the nature. We could be working it already, and that might be why we didn't take it, right? We're not doing it means we're working something already, and we're probably not going to tell you that we are. If we're working something already. But sometimes, and so we're working on kind of getting better responses back on those. And sometimes we do give it to the department to look at. But here's the thing to remember. If we're sending it over to the department, we're not sending it back to the office that had it. We're sending it to a different office. There's like several different offices that do in VHA. They're standing back up their investigative office. Their medical investigators are becoming more prominent than they used to be. They've got an integrity office that looks at things. VBA has a similar thing. So it's not going back to the department you complained about. It's going to a different place, right? But in most cases, we monitor what they do. And not every, but in most cases. And if we don't agree with it, we're probably going to go back in and look. Okay. But you may not know. And so that's the hard part. But the best thing is to just communicate with us, even if you're not sure, because I will tell you some of the best tips we've received is somebody saying, this just doesn't seem right. And sometimes it's members of the public who just come in and said, this education business is in my building, but I never see anybody and I don't know what's going on, but they drive big fancy cars and they seem to have a lot of money. And you know what I mean? We've had people giving tattoo training online to veterans in other parts of the world.
That's remarkable.
I just don't think it's just not happening.
I'm a little bit stunned. Like, wait, what? Yeah, people are making online courses for tattoos. It's like, how'd you learn to become a brain surgeon? Online.
Yeah. How'd you learn to fly an airplane, drive a truck? I hope it's not online training. That's a little scary.
It's such a sketchy environment. I mean, to begin with, one, because it is intimidating, reporting to an office at all. I understand that. I grew up in the 80s. Believe it or not, people don't talk about nothing, right? Nowadays, kids are worried about things. They're like, hey, I need mental health. I need this. I need that. And I go, that's where we do need to start focusing on is the application of that fear, right? Oh, I'm a little bit afraid, right? I'm not going to lie. I told my wife, hey, I'm really intimidated to have this conversation today. And she was like, why? I go, because like what you said, right? Before the show or at the beginning of it, people are going to say whatever they want to say. They're going to believe whatever they want to believe. And to know that you had that experience as a young child where it was coming from a community that you and had probably anticipated, maybe it wasn't an acknowledged expectation, but that anticipation of support. I think this is a critical moment in the Veterans Affairs because truth be told, this is a phase of reconstructioning, revolutionizing our technologies, our implementations of AI, our implementations of, higher output. Because again, the backlogs, the things that the semi-annual report really hit on, the backlogs, the registration, the acknowledgement, the recommendations, the audits, the investigations, right? It's difficult to communicate things when we can't open the oven while things are baking. Okay, this is something my wife yells at me all the time. She goes, did you check on it? Like, yeah, I opened it. You weren't supposed to open it.
You're taking the heat out. Yeah, my husband knows about me at the same thing because he's the cook, not me. So.
Oh my God. That's perfect, right? We're the two people looking at things cognitively, and just checking it. But that's the thing is, I think that's a societal issue where we have this anticipation of when it hits the fan, right? Like how I usually use with the sh in front of it, right? When it hits a fan, we have to really figure out how do we communicate, right? With these critical moments, because you're right. It could be something that's off. It could be something that's even more where, hey, this veteran, we get tons of emails, right? Tons of emails. We had tons of questions to ask for today. And a lot of the beautiful things that we have are influenced by it not necessarily going right all the time. And I always find that endearing, especially for someone like yourself who's, had this tremendous career for 30 years with the appeals process, which is dramatic. Okay. Like I know it's not
dramatic.
Yes, it's not the PC word, but it is the real word. It's dramatic. We don't know where these people are. It's hard to kind of communicate on their level sometimes. And here's this entity, this major organization, right? It's got a massive budget, and there's a lot of different things moving in every direction. It's the biggest organization in my eyes that fulfill this one of the smallest gaps of populace, which is 18 million, right? We have an 18 million populace. I think the VA has 6.2 million or 6.7 million involved in the compensation and care. But one of the things I always try to have anybody that sends us a letter like, oh my God, my doctor's this, or this was my experience in this program, and we get it. Like all of them, everybody's changing. Van and Luttrell talking about the VRNE program a lot, which is good. We do need to come back to a rational application of benefits and or compensation. We are a nation that's on the hook for the longest period of war, and still kind of going on. The foundation of what we have people coming home to really fulfill on that burden that Abraham Lincoln alluded to in his statement, we have to come to the terms of talking, communicating, just like we're doing today. This has been one of the best conversations I've had ever because I'm learning so much, right? I kind of want to turn it over to you for a bit of shout outs. It's usually what we do close to the end of the show. Is it your husband who yells at you for opening the oven, right? That'd be great. Is it your children, your family, or the people that you work with today? Because I always find it very important for us to give people the moment of time, even though this is a show, to say thank you. Is there anybody special out there or somebody that you'd want to give a shout out to?
Well, always my husband. I mean, we're coming up on 40 years of wedded bliss, and we've been together a little bit longer than that. So, he's my rock. He keeps me, rooted, which is important. I mean, my Southern Ohio roots keep me extremely rooted. And if my mom was here, definitely, but I still give her a shout out to above, because I wouldn't be where I am without her. I think my friends and family, my boys particularly, they're adults now, but they have to deal with the fact that their mother is in public service, and that's not an easy thing for families to take on. And then just my staff, I will tell you, and the staff of VA, I can't tell you how much work they do, but I will tell you the core of every single person I mentioned, but my husband's a veteran, is veterans and their families. This nation does not exist. This nation does not exist without the service of our veterans and the sacrifices of our veterans. And for me, that's integral into everything I do and how I operate. So, of course, my husband is a veteran. My children don't serve, but their father did, and they know it well. So, but I think that's important to acknowledge. And then, one thing I do want to mention when you talked about the call in and keeping track of that, I mean, people need to be able to tell us what's going on. And I get a lot of concerns and complaints on LinkedIn and other places, about different issues. And I tell people, go to the website, put it in. I mean, because we can't, I tell my people all the time, if I don't know about it, I can't address it. It's the same thing here. If you think there's an issue, put it in. We'll look at it. It may not come to fruition for a bit because it takes a minute, but we need to know. So, and that's really the core, because we can't serve our veterans. We are doing our veterans an injustice if you're not telling us what your concerns and your issues are, because you're not helping the system get better. So first, so that's the core, is veterans and their families, period.
Beautiful. Now, I do want to ask you kind of a silly question, right?
Sure.
But I think it's very important for everybody to relate to. What do you do when the work gets a little too stressful, where you're just overwhelmed? Do you hit those blocks anymore? You've been in for 30 years, you did the appeals stuff, and I know this is a huge position for you. The way the public kind of talks, and the way that, the way the situation of life is, like for your poor sons, their mother in the public speaking space. What do you do for yourself to self-care, or how do you manage that type of workload?
Yeah, your self-care, whether, I don't care what position you're in, wherever you are in life, your self-care has to be part of your whole care. Your self-care is part of your health, your mental health, and your physical health. And so I take downtime. My staff will probably tell you I don't take enough. But I take downtime. I do some things for me. I'm a big fan. I do try to play golf occasionally when I get a chance. Sometimes hitting a little ball around is helpful. But I do go out. I take strolls. We have pets, so I really spend the time with the dogs. I do. I try to spend some downtime with my husband, and just do stuff with him, even if it's just like going to the grocery store and, the typical stuff, right? I once had an employee who had to call me on the weekend for something, and they said, "I'm really sorry to bother you, ma'am. I just need to tell you." And I said, "That's okay. I'm just doing laundry." And they're like, "I can't picture it." And I'm like, it's just, but I mean, for me, even doing laundry is like a change, because it's not work, right? I don't need to do a lot of it. Don't send me any laundry. But just I think the typical life things that people think, oh, well, that, they don't do that, or I do it all. Like, I have been known to get on a riding lawnmower at home and mow the lawn. I will clean the house if I absolutely have to. It's not one of my favorite things to do, but I will. So things like that, things that are just normal everyday living, that you get the opportunity and the blessings to enjoy each day, going out at sunset, watching the sunset, things like that. It's important to take those moments, because those small moments can become extremely big moments and if you're not paying attention, you miss them.
I really appreciate that. I think it's one of the most wholesome inward looks to a representative that many people have opinions of or thoughts of. I call them delusions of grandeur. Usually when you look into the entertainment space and you're like, hey, what is this person doing? It's like, no, this is just a human being fulfilling a role in a capacity that you're 100% dedicated to. You're the watchdog of the VA. Your husband is a veteran, prior service, your father, prior service, your brother, all these people that have served in your life that I feel that I relate to, I understand intimately. My wife has been my caregiver for more than 13 years now, and the situations we've been through, both mental health and physical health, there's been a tremendous amount of need and support. And we notice that the more we communicate to persons like yourself, right, in leadership roles where we can identify with and kind of dissolve that intimidation and that apprehension of, look, this is an official role, sure, but I do laundry, okay, like, I please don't send me any, but I do, like, where are people coming up with this fixation of holier than thou? I'm like, no, it just seems to me that I'm very glad, I should say, that we've been able to take this moment of time, communicate the way that we have, and to share, illuminate yourself with our audience and those out there, because there are many caregivers, there are many families out there, veterans, that are going through adversity, homelessness, bankruptcy, suicide, ideation, mental health crisis, physical health crisis.
Very hard.
It's excruciatingly hard, but you have been in that seat, right? You know what that is like, and you know what we could be doing on a level that is consummate to that obligation to assist, to provide, to bear that burden, to continue to serve. I find it such an enriching conversation today because, again, I get to do this. This is my thing that I love to have open. And I want you guys to come on. I want you to come back on anytime you want, because the more and more I learn about the semi-annual report and, the way that we can engage with different training sessions and elevate the practices of the Veterans Affairs to that point where it's reflecting, in my position, reflecting the massive investment our nation is garnering that institution. And your office is there. It's the watchdog to make sure these things happen, that veterans have this outlook of, this is for me, not against me. And that's something that I really aim to do with this episode in our future shows. Anything I could put my hands into to illuminate the veteran community and the caregiver community, all the givers of love, right?
Yeah.
And to show, hey, we got to remove this dehumanization and this polarization within our partisan politics, our application of policy, and we have to start coming together and aiming it towards this actual solution, this outcome that's tenable and it's applicable. Because sometimes, hey, I might have thrown some kind of information out there that's old and it's outdated, but you guys are leading from the front. You're the tip of the spear. You're that needle that pokes through in the darkness of night that says, hey, we can be doing better. Let me just get you over here on the right side. To kind of leave us off on the last little moment to leave our listeners out on, what would be the main core message that you would like our families, our veterans, to walk away with from today?
I think probably the core message is to think and to remember that VA OIG is your watchdog. It's not, it belongs to Congress, it belongs to the department, but it also belongs to our veterans, and it's your watchdog. So if you don't tell us, we can't look. So our core mission, like the department's, is veterans first.